Hi, I'm Lisa Gonzales, Chief Business Officer here in Mount Diablo Unified. Ask the CBO is back, and I'm going to start this year by taking a look at COVID funds, the one-time funds that we received, the different buckets of them, and exactly what some of the restrictions are, as well as how we've spent them. And the four that I'm going to take a look at are AB 86, Assembly Bill 86 for expanded learning. There's another one for in-person instruction, and then two federal funds, ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. To start with, I want to give you a little bit of an idea of the federal funding that we've received for the pandemic. As we've reported over the last year and a half, the first three that you see there, the CR Coronavirus Relief Fund, GEAR, and ESSER 1, those have been fully spent on allowable expenses from the federal government. All of our reports have been submitted, and we didn't have to give any funds back because we fully spent them before the deadline. We had approximately $15 million in Coronavirus Relief Fund, close to $2 million in GEAR, and then about $4.5 million in ESSER 2. We were awarded funds for ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. You can see those there. The ESSER 2, we have to obligate those funds by the end of September of next year. That means that, let's say that we've got a purchase that we put in the beginning of September, even though we may not receive it and spend the money by the end of September, as soon as we've obligated those funds, we're able to go ahead and continue to spend that money. Our expectation is we've had the money spent by the end of this fiscal year. ESSER 3, we have another year on top of that. We've got approximately $38 million that we were awarded there. So what I want to do is just go over each of these, what was allowable, and some of the examples of what we've spent. AB 86, this is an amount of money that we received based on the fact that we opened schools and had students back a year ago before April 1st. The allowable expenses are what you see there, things that were related to COVID testing, cleaning, PPEs, ventilation, salaries, mental health, those types of components. What we spent it on so far were approximately $4.8 million on $1,500 stipends for anybody who was employed. This was about a year ago. Substitutes for COVID-related absences, right now we're at close to $1.4 million for that. That is just for individuals who call in who need substitutes, whose rationale for the absence is because it is related to COVID. Extra time and overtime, you can see that we have a number of staff members that for a few years we have funded out of AB 86, including our Net Tech ones. We had additional noon supervisors and campus supervisors over the last year, and additional time for athletic directors. Instructional materials for Eagle Peak. This is because when we receive these funds, we are required to share some of those with Eagle Peak, so some expenses came in there. Professional development, a little bit of technology infrastructure at one school site. You can see some PPEs, and then we have something that's called indirect costs. Indirect costs are based on the entire amount of money that we receive. As we spend that, there are certain amounts that we get back for our basic operating expenses. The Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant, this is also Assembly Bill 86. It required a fairly extensive plan that we had to create. This was brought to the board over a year ago. It is available online on our website. The allowable expenses with AB 86 for expanded learning, it includes paraprofessionals, tutors, before and after school programs, a lot of educator training in a number of different areas, including accelerated learning, family support. It covers mental health, counseling, credit recovery, assessment systems to really find out where our students are during and after COVID. This was school meals, so access to school meals, so really some staffing involved with food and nutrition, and then technology. What we have spent it on has been vast, and we continue to spend these funds. So what you're able to see here is approximately $2.4 million in enrichment teachers and other staffing for classrooms. We increased our substitute rate. So this was the increase to our substitute rate only from January 1st to June 30th of this past fiscal year, so 2022. You can see Chromebooks, counselors, teacher laptops, part of our summer school expenses, administrative subs for when our administrators were out related to COVID. There's a lot of different things you can see here, so I'm just going to pause for a second so that you can go ahead and take a look. A couple of others that I want to point out. The substitute teacher $1,000 stipends. This is for the substitutes who agreed to work with us more than 20 days in the spring when we were really in the heat of dealing with Omicron and a lot of staff absences and a lot of students being ill. Here are more examples of what's been spent. I could probably do another entire slide, but I just wanted to give you a flavor as to what it's covered: attendance programs, substitutes for specific positions, the mystery science contract that is used at the elementary level, overtime, part of the HVAC system over at Northgate, college and career field trips, the Mindful Life contract. There is a set aside. A set aside is a specific amount of money that is earmarked within this grant to cover paraprofessionals. It's approximately $1.922 million. We will have that all spent by the end of this next year, but that is a chunk of money that we're holding on to that we are working out some ways to spend that right now. There are two other pots or buckets of money. ESSER 2 that was provided by President Trump, and then ESSER 3 that was provided by President Biden. When these allocations come forward, it generally takes about 5 to 6 months before the specifics are ironed out and school districts get that information. So there's some different timelines on these. We have a little over a year for ESSER 2, a little over 2 years for ESSER 3. Here, the allowable expenses are the same between ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. So you can see anything related to COVID, meals, technology, summer programs, assessment systems, attendance, parent support, anything relating to facilities that we can legitimately tie back to COVID, air systems, including in vehicles, school safety, and anything that would fall into the category of continuity of services. ESSER 2 does not have the same requirement as ESSER 3, but in all the funds that we received for ESSER 3, 20% of it has to be spent addressing learning loss with students. So let's take a quick look at what it is that we've been spending it on. This is a look at ESSER 2. So a great deal of technology, software, systems, enterprise systems, multiple years of a lot of these systems to really protect devices, mostly to protect students and to protect our infrastructure. So close to $4 million there. We had fencing at 3 specific school sites that we determined were very important. HVAC at 2 different locations. So you'll see part of HVAC was covered here. We've got HVAC covered in a number of different budgets as well. We had to take a tax revenue anticipation note. Basically, it was a loan that we got over a year ago because the state was withholding funds. Unfortunately, we have to pay for that trans, so that cost us approximately $371,000. So yes, we had to borrow money because the state delayed our payments. So we paid this out of ESSER. Food warmers, vehicles, the new teacher project technical assistance that we're getting instructionally across the district, security cameras, professional development, some of the science programs, building of tables. So I know that we're still purchasing tables and we're still having those delivered. Those were paid out of ESSER 2. When we take a look at ESSER 3, so far in the last fiscal year, this is what we've spent. You see more Chromebooks, teacher laptops, the rest of the HVAC from Northgate, a great deal that has to do with PPEs, so personal protection for COVID, whether that was masks or sometimes it's been other types of filters. Again, this does have indirect costs in this budget. We have invested nicely in picnic tables and umbrellas for our school sites. They have not all been delivered. We placed that order over a year ago, but you can see that there. More of our vehicles, wireless access points so that students and staff can easily access the internet, especially now that they've got one-to-one devices with Chromebooks. You can see more there with Chromebook cases, extra chargers, filters, technology, small amount on security cameras, much more to come. This really just gives us a look at all of the funds. Really, we want to make sure that we continue to focus on addressing any barriers students have to learning, additional support, and really most importantly, addressing learning loss and health and safety. So that's it for this week. I know we're starting a new year. You may have a lot of questions. Please do go ahead and send those to cbo@mdusd.org, and I would be happy to do a presentation on those.